Hey guys, welcome back to another Thinkle Thunkers video. I'm Landon, and today we're going to be ranking the bosses of LEGO Marvel Superheroes. This game goes way back for me and has been a part of my life for a very long time. It's been one of those ones that I constantly go back to and probably will for the rest of my life. With that being said, we have 38 bosses that are mediocre as can be to get through, so let's get started. We start the ranking off with a freaking banger. Green Goblin's first fight is absolutely the pinnacle of boss fights in this game. What I mean by that is, just like around half the bosses, he sucks. He takes one hit to kill and doesn't provide any real threat. The only cool thing is that he looks cool, but we'll talk about that when we get to the real Goblin fight. Doc Ock's first fight doesn't get dead last because of one mechanic that it uses, which is forcing you to switch to the second character. This game has a couple other fights like this, so what makes it the worst? The design of Ock isn't the best in this game, as well as the arena being a basic rooftop, but the new mechanic alone makes it better than last place. Electro's fight is the exact same as Doc Ock's. The only reason he gets higher is because I enjoy his design a little more. The lightning looks better than the Ock arms, and the bank that's partially flooded is better than the basic rooftop. Otherwise, this fight still sucks really bad. Loki gets the top of the changed character boss fights because it has the best arena by far. The Rainbow Bridge in Asgard is a beautiful setting, but doesn't do enough to get Loki's first fight higher in the ranking. Toad's fight is objectively worse than the four before him due to never punching him, so why does he get higher than the others? Storm gets introduced as a character and absolutely wrecks Toad in a comedic way, burning him like Obi-Wan burnt Anakin. The comedic effect alone gets to boost him up to 34, which isn't that big of a deal, but good for him I guess. Pyro is part of this barely a boss section of the list, which is sadly longer than it should be. So what makes him cooler than the rest below him? Well, it's not his design, that's for sure, but it's the introduction of Iceman and the classic rivalry of the two. I love the fact that Pyro once again gets bested by Bobby in a classic fire vs. ice fight. Otherwise, this fight is just like the rest of these bad bosses. Landon, why is this fight so much higher than the other Loki fight? Because it makes you specifically have to use two characters. Loki is on top of a staircase which is iced over, which makes you use the two flying characters in the level to go get him. The fight is the exact same thing in every other aspect, besides the setting, so it gets a little bit higher. Loki's quote-unquote third fight is the best basically by default, as it uses the rare cloning mechanic in the game, which I really enjoy. Besides that, nothing is new and the boss still sucks balls. Leader is the same as most of the fights below it, with it taking you switching characters and punching him once to beat him. He has a shield around him, preventing you from getting him without blowing up 3 silver objects to get to him. He sets himself apart from the rest of the trash bosses, but still sucks real bad. Abomination is technically the first boss you run into in the game and introduces you to the classic Big Fig Brawl, which is always fun to do. Sadly, the Big Fig Brawl doesn't change the fact that he is still terrible, but he is the best of the barely a boss category, so good on him I guess. Also, the Grand Central Station being covered in sand is a very cool setting and definitely helped push him up in the ranking. Shocker could arguably be below some of the bosses below it, just because of how bad it is. You just punch him 3 times and that's it. The arena is nice, as he, like Electro, is in the flooding bank, but anything else is just really bad. Electra is cool I guess, nothing special as a boss, though you can't physically attack her and can only use throwables to attack her, which is a mechanic we haven't seen yet on the list, so she gets some points for that. Once again though, this is just a 3-hit horrible boss that gets shoved into a Deadpool level, which honestly wasn't that good. Bullseye is in and on the same level as Elektra, but gets the nod above her as he gets big guns he sits on, and I like his design a tad more, even if it's basic. Kingpin is also on and in the same level as Elektra and Bullseye, but I see him as the best of the 3 bosses. He of course has the perk of being the main boss of the level, but he also uses the most mechanics as he uses Spider-Man's Spidey Sense, Spider-Man's webs, a throwable, and a lever you push, all to knock a few chandeliers on his head. It still isn't very good, but I appreciate that we are getting into the more mechanically advanced bosses. The Lizard's boss fight is interesting, as he gets the entirety of the level dedicated to his boss fight. The setting is alright, nothing too special with it being a lab, but the fight is nothing spectacular and is quite boring, as you will do a mini puzzle with both Thing and Spider-Man 3 times in order to beat the boss. He gets saved by his design, as the Lizard has the lab coat over his lizard body, which adds a nice touch. Aldrich Killian is the first story boss on the list I would consider a real boss, which doesn't say a lot as the boss still sucks and the ones below it I barely consider a boss in the first place. I would talk about the setting, but I'm saving it for the Mandarin fight later in the list. But Killian is nothing special, as you fight some goons, hit Mandarin as he mind controls your bud, then punch Killian. You rinse and repeat that 2 other times, and that's the boss fight. I would say he's the first boss on the list that is in the very long tier of mid to mediocrity. I absolutely love Dormammu's design in this game, and the setting is pretty alright as well. That's where the praise ends with Dormammu. His fight is the same as Aldrich Killian's, except it lasts for 6 hearts instead of 3. I understand him being a magical being, but 6 hearts for a Deadpool level is a little absurd, when it's the same thing over and over again. I expected more from the Doorman, but was disappointed in the end. Nightmare's fight is cool, on paper. I don't think it was the best in execution though. Doing little things like destroying Nightmare in a car and having Ghost Rider do a ramp to hit Nightmare are really cool, but the fight just seems longer than it should be and feels really dull. The setting of the circus is fun and different from what we see in the rest of the game, but the fight is boring as can be and just doesn't do it for me. Malekith is average. Average design for the character, average mechanics to the fight, average attacks. The only thing not average is the setting, which is pretty cool as it's the ice planet of Jotunheim. Besides that, it's a very average boss and is very forgettable. Mysterio's character design is great like normal, and the setting is as solid as they come. Mysterio gets in the top half of the list pretty much on that alone. He is basically the same as the Nightmare fight, but a little better as the mechanics are a little better, and the characters you use are more unique and have better abilities. When it comes down to it though, he's still basic and pretty average overall. I have a lot of words with Destroyer, as he is personally my least favorite boss in the entire game. But this list isn't based entirely on personal feelings. It's based on that as well as my feelings on the mechanics and setting. And as much as I hate the random RNG that can happen, the long amount of waiting times, and the very boring fight overall, I can't deny that the Frozen over Asgard is a beautiful setting, and the mechanics aren't the worst possible things. The design of the Destroyer also is accurate, so it gets points for that. But the bad fighting and the horrible RNG really diminish this fight for me. My personal opinion for the best optional boss in the game goes to Vulture, and it's honestly due to its stupidity. Vulture is a comedic fun fest, as the way you defeat him is by making things that look like the Avengers or other Marvel things, and he flies into it. It's not the most mechanically sound fight, but when it comes to its comedy factor, it's near the top. Sabretooth is basically Malekith done better, even if it's only by a little bit. You build things as Wolverine and throw them as Hulk. This is after beating up some goons, but that's all the fight really is. My favorite part about it is the arena, as you're on a constantly rising elevator, and I think it looks really cool. Sabretooth isn't anything special, but he finally begins the bosses that I think are around average to slightly above average. Doc Ock's main fight is about patience and timing, both things I do not have. This fight is boring, but Times Square is a great setting, and getting to rip off Ock's tentacle legs is a great ending to a mediocre boss. How does a character that I hate in almost every single thing he's in get above 25 other bosses? This is because his fight isn't horrible, obviously, and I find it quite difficult compared to other fights in the game. His attacks are difficult for me to dodge as he fills the small circular arena with lava and then uses a gust of wind attack that really gets me every time, but like almost every other boss, it's goons and punch, so it has nothing truly unique to it. Don't throw pitchforks at me, calm down. I understand what you're thinking, so let me explain myself before you rage at me. Doom and Doombot are being classified as different bosses, so Doom doesn't get the benefit of having Doombot to boost his rating, and without that the fight is barely above average. You use Cap's shield to laser the power source of the gun Dr. Doom uses twice, and then punch him regularly once. His fight gets massively carried by his arena, which is in space, and his story implications, as he is pretty much one of the big bads of the game, so he gets placed lower on the list. Average fight, great character. Yes, I think Doombot is more fun of a boss than Doom. No, I won't take it back. Doombot is more fun as you get to use the thing, violate him, and then throw him into space using Spider-Man. The arena is the same as well, so that's a plus. Abomination's second fight barely makes it out of the top 10 because without its environmental arena use, it's just another Big Fig brawl, which isn't my favorite thing, but a mechanic I enjoy. The raft is a nice arena and being outside with the weather is pretty nice. Otherwise though, Abomination doesn't have a lot to talk about. Red Skull gets absolutely carried by his comedic effect. That is pretty much the only reason that he gets in the top 10. His arena is mid besides the laser behind him, and the mechanics of the fight are nothing special and honestly pretty boring. But smashing his skull into his torso is very funny, so he gets a top 10 nod for me. Juggernaut is cool. His boss is pretty nice. You throw things at him, make him run into things, freeze him, and repeat until you take over his mind at the very end. Using him to destroy clumps of enemies at the end is very fun and a nice mechanic as it's the only time we see this in the entire game. For that mechanic alone, he gets the 9th spot. The Latveria Castle is one of my favorite arenas in the entire game, which makes it really weird that Goblin is the boss and not Doom. But Goblin's fight is pretty good. Watching him fly around and being able to use every Fantastic Four member's powers to beat him is really nice and something that just isn't used often. And every time he gets hit off of his glider, it's really funny. The boss is all around just solid. Yes, the final boss of the game doesn't make the top 5. No, I don't think the boss is great. It's just good. The entire level revolves around the boss, which makes sense as he is supposedly the big bad that we've been building up to since the beginning, but I feel that he is just underwhelming. The first 2 sections are basically the same thing, boring overall, and the last 2 carry the actual mechanical sections as they have the more unique characters and abilities. The Helicarrier is a very good arena and a lot better than a majority of the other arenas, so some points for that, but overall the final boss in the game is underwhelming and disappointing. Mandarin has the coolest overall sequence in the game, with the House Party Protocol bringing in all of the Iron Man suits to beat the Mandarin as he has stolen the Hulkbuster armor. Then you burn the back off after going through that amazing sequence with some banger music. The sequence alone brings it nearly into the top 5. This boss sets the bar really high for the rest of the game, and it's sad that most of the game doesn't live up to that hype. The boss uses everyone and uses the weaknesses of Sandman as the way you beat him. This is a very rare occurrence of that and I really appreciate it. Sandman's quips and puns also make the fight very enjoyable and very fun on replay. All around the fight is very solid, so it gets the nod into my top 5. A doppelganger boss fight that hints towards a future boss fight is a very cool idea, and I think it's executed perfectly. The beginning being used to stop Rhino and then turning into fighting Magneto is done really well. Magneto pulls out a gun, which is really funny, as well as the goons of the fight being raptors, which is very cool and different. The arena, though, isn't anything, so it gets docked a couple points for that. First of all, The jump scare at the beginning is phenomenal and I love it every time. The fight uses Venom's weaknesses perfectly, with a loud bell, loud music, and a flamethrower to burn him, which is always fun. The goons are also the toughest in the game as the symbiote scientists always pack a punch. The arena is very cool looking visually with the constant ooze everywhere, but it isn't any cool area as it's just an underground lab. The fight is very fun, but the arena holds it back from being any higher. If you asked me to make this list a couple years ago, this would have been number 1 by a mile. Replaying the game has changed my perception of the fight though. I still absolutely love the boss arena as the Statue of Liberty's head is my favorite arena in the game. The concept and mechanics of the fight are also very unique as Mastermind makes you fight your own teammates and has ghost versions of their worst enemies as goons, which is also super unique. Bringing back the clone mechanic is also very fun and unique as we only see it a couple times throughout the game. The one downside and the only reason he doesn't get the 1 spot is because he serves zero purpose to the story. This causes him to fall just short of the number 1 spot. Leaving Magneto as the best boss in LEGO Marvel Superheroes. His arena is great, his mechanics are fantastic, the music is by far the best track in the entire game, and all around the boss is great. I believe his health bar is the largest in the game, but it still feels like the perfect amount. His difficulty is also scaled perfectly as he is one of the final bosses in the game. The design of the boss is also fantastic as you're fighting a giant hulking Magneto that is made of metals. The boss is the closest to a perfect boss in the game. All those things make him the best boss in the game, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. That's all 38 bosses of LEGO Marvel Superheroes. I have zero clue what game I'm going to rank next, so if you have any ideas for what I should rank, leave them down below, as well as if you agree or disagree with my list. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you around.